Okay, so I really, I wanted to do this because I don't really get to gloat very often. But I think, Pasta earlier said, you know, we're always early. We spy things, but it's not about getting credit. It's not about getting credit, but I'm getting really sick of not just because I mean, we were one of the first people to really call her out. And the reason being was because we were so close to the Sanders campaign. I mean, I followed the Sanders campaign since 2015 and more thoroughly in 2020 even, and just saw how corrupt from the onslaught that was. And with AOC, I mean, we did a whole fundraiser for her. We did a whole thing. There was a whole backstory to all that happened with the AOC situation, and it was personal in terms of falling for another politician at that rate. But quickly, things became really clear with her
Yeah.
from the moment she got elected. Where
Yeah.
Pasta, pointed out there was a group of people who were angry at her at that moment, and that
Mhm.
was completely written off. A lot of people that she had worked with were angry with her, and so from that moment there was that, and then there was just the positioning of certain things, the way she got in, because actual progressives never got in, and the way she won against a powerful Democrat out of nowhere. In spite of her game of strategy and the field work that these organizers and volunteers did, it was still hard to believe there. So there was a lot of things that added up, but really all it took was watching her voting and watching what she said versus what she was doing. And so when you follow that, there really is going wrong. And a lot of people smeared us, a lot of people called us names, a lot of people said this, and the same thing with Bernie as well when we were pointing out the issues with his campaign. um but at the end of the day, Nico also was one of the people that definitely called her out from the start. And largely because in comparison to Tulsi Gabbard, whatever you may think of Tulsi Gabbard, she ran a more transparent uh, campaign in terms of she really told people who she was. The really, like, in terms of what she said, and what she did politically. She is outright with her beliefs, and you may not agree with them, but she has been outright with them. And so the way AOC was just catapulted into the mainstream and like just given all this love by mainstream media should have been like a final and clear signal. Nobody that is an actual threat to the status quo will ever be propped up like that,
Mhm.
ever.
Yeah.
And that was one thing too. If
Yeah.
you want to say something before we get
No,
started.
no, I just like we talked about it earlier too as well. I went into her campaign office when she was actually, when she was running about, I think it was about 6.5, 7 weeks out from campaign from the election, excuse me. And they gave the good pizza, fam. They got a really good pizza in the Bronx, so it was awesome pizza. They fed everybody, and I was really impressed by the organizing. They were splitting people up. People who spoke Hindu were over here, Spanish over here, Arabic over there, American English over here. Let's split up. Let's go. Let's hit the territory well. And when the person who was running that meeting on an election night, as our good friend Lauren Steiner went into the event, had a little bit of breakdown and was really, really upset and was pissed off. So I really made the phone call out to that person. I totally forgot her name right now. Because after that phone call, I never spoke to her again. She never returned any of my calls. It was kind of like the old school street value thing, fam, where they don't rat people out. But it was obvious there was things going on within the campaign. It seemed like the Democratic lawyers had come in, and we were starting to question this from people we knew. Like, we're like, what's going on? Is something happening over there? Because it doesn't seem right. It seems like all the grassroots people are getting pushed out, and now here come the Democratic lawyers. They're in there and whatnot. So we sensed it very early from election night. We were saying something stinks over here. And sure enough, it played out. And I think what you said is the most important. You don't have to know these things. You just see by the way they push policies. You just see the way she became anti-censorship, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, pro-censorship, excuse me. She was supposed to be anti-censorship, but she became pro-censorship. And she believed into platforming people and seeing at her hearings and the way she voted when it came to foreign policy, a lot of the votes. So all you had to do was look at her voting record to catch her. And this is where we're at right now. AOC is just another Democrat.
Yeah, and again, this is why you don't vote for Democrats, but that's just beside the point. So I want to read a little bit from this article, if it lets me. So this is from these people used to praise her, like literally. These are some of the most AOCIA fans here. Okay, um, they said Alexandria Ocasio Cortez's recent appearance on the Pod Save America podcast, literally number one liberal podcast, had for me the feeling of a final disappointment. The kind that's a little sad but brings a set of quixotic hopes to a close. AOC appeared on the popular Crooked Media show to announce her endorsement of Joe Biden for president in the 2024 election. To deliver that particular endorsement while appearing on that particular podcast, where former Obama administration staffers defined the limits of acceptable left of center opinion, was to send a very deliberate message. It was AOC's last kiss off to the radicals who had supported her, voted for her, donated to her campaign, and made her unusually famous in American politics, the beneficiary of a wholly unique cult of personality that is now starting to come undone. An endorsement of a sitting president, after all, doesn't have to be a ceremonial affair. Ocasio Cortez could have sent out a tweet and making her announcement in a forum where the hosts were saying that a vote for anyone but Joe Biden was a vote for Donald Trump, a distillation of the hollow "we're not Trump" message that Democrats have been loudly pushing for the past 7 years. AOC was putting a bow on a half-decade long drift from radical outsider to establishment liberal. Since taking office in January 2019, she has deferred to party leadership again and again on issues that matter, even as she has made token gestures of resistance. That's all they are, symbolic gestures, to solidify the illusion that she is gadfly. And increasingly, she seems stung by criticism from the left to the point where she appears ready to simply embrace her party and its politics with open arms. So that's just the beginning, right, um, of who AOC is and or what AOC has become. But I really do think, like I've said this about other people, I think this is who she always was. I think she is definitely had intelligence, is some sort of intelligence influence based on her past work at the office of Ted Kennedy, her past trips to Africa that only certain people take, where she went to school in Boston, and just the way everything seemed fit to make her look like a working class, uh, up and coming Latina and rising hero. That really resonated with millennials and with people my age that were, we grew up after, we were coming out of college after a few years after the fall of the banks and how everything collapsed in 2008 and 2009. So we were still in college at that time, and like AOC, really kind of, she really fit the mold where she was, a bartender, and she really was working her way, and she had the identity politics down pat. And so it's just funny how, like, looking at it now and looking, it's like, how did we not just like get our red flags from the beginning, from the very before she even like ran? Because she, positioned herself as an organizer for Bernie Sanders, and she wasn't even an organizer. And Nico also did an article, as well, where we talked about all this stuff.
Yeah. I think the reason why, I think that we a lot of people saw it, but the sensationalism, right? The lifting people up, the what do you call it? The hero worshiping really blinded people from really saying the truth. They just didn't want it to be true more than anything. And by the way, some people are saying there's issues with Rumble right now. So I know the crowd has dropped, but I think there's some issues with Rumble going on. But yeah, that is the reason why, fam. It's sensationalism. You know what I'm saying? They'll make excuses for people you like. That's what they did for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people did, but this article, this was it was a little later than when all of this was happening, but it was last year, where Nico wrote this article, and he really just goes through, everything that she did, and he talks about Tulsi Gabbard and the different reactions to Brianna Joy Gray and Tulsi Gabbard, people in the Bernie, sector, the Bernie sphere of things. And yeah, and so who is AOC loyal to? He's he talks about how she defends herself from Republican attacks. She always made herself the victim, but she actually never actually went and actually fought really a battle independent of the Democratic Party. So if you haven't read this article from over a year ago, I suggest reading it, and talking about that, and how she positioned herself in, like as Pasta said, pro censorship, how she positioned herself as a friend of really APAC, always talking out of both sides of her mouth when it comes to the Israel-Palestine issue, um, just like Ilhan Omar, and the Justice Democrat crap. And what I hate about AOC
Just
is the
Democrat.
fact is yeah, exactly. And what I hate about AOC is the fact that she took money from poor people, from working class people, and made people think that by people who barely had money donating to her, because she wasn't being funded by big money donors, that she was going to be better. And she actually turned out to be the opposite, because I think it's worse, and we've said this before a long time ago. I think it's worse to pretend to be on the side of the people and then do everything possible to undermine them. And that's what she is. Because when I look at Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I am under no sort of hypnotic condition to think Debbie Wasserman Schultz is on the side of the people. When I look at Mitch McConnell, I know where Mitch McConnell stands. But AOC, she tricked a lot of people. And to me, that is far more nefarious than somebody who really shows you, who they are.
Yeah. Fam, I'm going to quote Hillary Clinton. And when somebody shows you who they are or tells you who they are, believe them.
Did you really say that? Oh God.
Yeah. She said it in
Why did she take all the good quotes? Like, we're gonna put
They all
boots on
take
the
the good quotes. They take all the good quotes on purpose. So then anytime you use it, it's fucking disarmed. It's hold their feet to the fire, hold them accountable. Same
yeah,
freaking thing right here.
I can't hear those phrases
They've taken
anymore.
it from us. Yeah.
So socialist MMA, he said, Nick, right? He said, all the people who used to get mad at me, and that literally all of us who called it from the start, for bashing AOC, are now forced to admit what we've been saying for years now. Sad thing is, these democratic socialist types will never apologize for attacking us for telling the truth about AOC before it was cool. And guess what? I say the same thing about COVID. I say the same thing about elections. I say the same thing about Russiagate. I say the same thing about, this conflict. What else? Oh, January 6th, when we said it was a psyop because we were there.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on. And I'm not doing this
Yeah.
because, I'm trying to really throw it in people's faces, but it's just really not hard when you look at the same mechanisms that are used for these same type of campaigns over and over and over and over again. And so this is why we're not oracles here. We're not sitting there here. I'm not like the oracle from the Matrix, and I don't have all these screens in front of me where I can see what's going to happen. But it's just kind of like you just follow these same patterns, and and the whole thing about DSA too. We've talked about DSA. We've talked about PSL. Okay, there's co-option is what intelligence does. They take something that is supposed to be a radical thing, they co-opt it, they turn it into a liberal, quasi symbolic bullshit gesture, and then that's all you get. Gestures, and gestures don't pay rent, and gestures don't move anything or change anything, and don't help anybody out. But that's exactly what liberals do, and they've destroyed any sort of real anti-imperialist movement in the United States. That is what AOC is, what's left of it. I mean, that's what is supposed to be, the ruckus that was supposed to happen in the House. Fam, you want to read this?
Fam. I will not forget. It was you, Pasta, Fiorella, and Jimmy that woke me up to a lot, including AOC. I was an AOC supporter before I started following you in 2020. Well, thank you so much.
This was said to Nico House. This was under Nico's tweet, and I mean, I think it's, it's pretty cool that to hear that from people, and the same people too. It's always the same people, that really have seen through a lot of this. And I really, it's crazy because people, Indy himself, I remember Indy saying that I was feisty with him. And that I was, I was Fiorella because I can be feisty. I know that. Pasta knows that more than anybody. And and then he was like, okay, I get what you're saying now. So I mean, I do think it takes time, and we do have to have some sort of like patience, to a degree. And I remind myself this all the time because my patience is dwindling every day. So by the time I'm like old, I'll have zero patience and I'll be an angry old man. But um it's kind of like that thing where it's just, it happens. And I do think that more and more people are seeing through things now. The problem we have to face now is the co-option of what we're seeing through, the manipulation of it, because it's become the anti-establishment narrative. And I said this before, I think, on a show with Kim Iverson. The anti-establishment narrative is becoming like the more popular narrative. And so we do have to watch out for the counter narrative of the counter narrative, and that is something I agree with Steve on a lot, because I do think these things do get co-opted. Um, Here's another one: MMT Chaparrito. AOC equals controlled opposition. We have zero representation. Thanks, Yo Pasta and Fiorella, the Combo Couch. Follow the Combo Couch anywhere you can. Rockfin is one such place. This was from, fam, if you scroll down, this is from 2021, December 2021. Remember AOC's greatest hits. So that's a good one. If you haven't seen that one, that's a good video. AOC's greatest hits, because we go over
2021.
everything she did. That was 2021. So
Yeah. Thank you, MMT Chaparrito. We appreciate the share, and thank you for bringing that out too as well. You can probably post some of those things from COVID as well. But the Yas Queen, I remember you like using the Yas Queen, gloating and thanking mainstream media propagandists for the credit of holding her tongue against the Democratic Party. She vowed to bring the ruckus to its peak. Its peak. We fucking told you so. Hope you finally stop standing politicians. That was the name of the documentary, right? Bring the ruckus, fam.
Yeah.
With another person who's not like really, not even around anymore.
Moulton.
Who?
Yeah, Moulton.
Well, there's Seth Moulton. I was talking about Bring the Ruckus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, none of those people are, and that's because Justice Democrats and brand new Congress or whatever was a grift from the start. But again, should I remind people of what the railway workers and what she did, how she folded with that, how she folded with the rent, what was it, the rent, the rent freezing.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah. Moratorium.
The whatchamacallit, for me, the biggest no is when she went to Congress, and it was about a hearing on censorship and data, right? And it was about not so much censorship, but more about data, about Facebook getting away with selling our data to different companies that could then use it against us, like Cambridge Analytica. And what did she do? She literally, she stood up for going after Trumpers, and she pushed for more censorship rather than going and holding Zuckerberg accountable for selling our data and the control of our data. That's when a lot of people are talking about we need a technocratical Bill of Rights. You know what I'm saying? Our personal identity online. That's where a lot of that stuff came from. And since that point, she's always been about deplatforming. She's even said deplatforming works. She's about banning people, censoring people. She's been pretty awful. But that hearing itself, she started off good with a couple questions, and then she went right after, well, why aren't you censoring this misinformation? I was like, what? Did she just do that? All right, this woman's a fugazi, 100%. We got nothing from her, nothing whatsoever. In fact, she's even worse than a lot of these other Democrats because, she pretends to be a voice of the, of the little guy, but yet she's just standing for, big tech, big pharma, just like every single other. Just recently, fam, right? When she was asked and cornered about the whole situation, why hasn't she said anything about these people who lost their jobs in New York, over 50,000 of them because of the mandates. Why hasn't she spoken up for them? She pretty much said in a roundabout way that she agrees with them losing their job. You know, I mean, she's awful. She is completely awful.
And there's a lot of things that we said before 2020 even, but I will say, she this one from last year, I said she voted yes to fund Palestinian deaths with the Iron Dome. I won't forget the Iron Dome because you guys know that is a huge issue. She voted present, remember, on the funding for Capitol Police. She voted to sanction Cambodia. And if you don't recall, those are some of the votes she did. There are others. And I said AOC is an imperialist who functions as a celebrity for the thirsty DSA crowd who doesn't want revolution but likes to pretend. And this is true. And this is still true of those people. You know, this is where the right really gets it wrong here. They think that socialism is AOC, that socialism is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. It's just not the case, right? Like this is just not the case. And it's kind of like this is on purpose. AOC's role is to really make socialists, or the idea of socialism, because she was never really a socialist, a hateful thing, to really get the right riled up, which is why she always fights with the right on all these culture war issues. That's all she is. That's all she's there for. It's like a celebrity reality TV star thing. And, you know, that's why her thing with Marco Rubio is so funny, because that's what it is. And then there was this one in 2021, September, and AOC introduced an amendment on behalf of Mark Pocan to reduce the Pentagon budget by 10%. And I said this is performative, as AOC just changed her no vote to present for the Iron Dome, giving more money to Israel and funding more imperialist attacks on Palestinians. So again, with the Iron Dome vote, and of course it never happened, right? The budget was never reduced. In fact, we know now from all the billions being sent to Ukraine, if anything, the budget has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So what exactly did we get out of AOC? Nothing but really the death of any sort of anti-establishment really movement on the left. These progressives have become Democrats, fully loaded with the pro censorship, pro Ukraine, neo-Nazi sending bombs to Ukraine, pro pretty much everything the Democratic Party is, anti-Russia, anti-Iran, pro-NATO talking points, pro Bashar al-Assad is a brutal dictator. Even with China, they're like, well, China needs to be more democratic. So at the end of the day, they're pretty much the same. And you don't really get a movement out of that. It's dead. The right has more of a movement. And this is not something, that I'm saying because I'm supportive of Trump or anything, but he definitely has more of a movement, and he's definitely been far more, seems like far more honest about what he believes than anybody in the squad. And the Republicans have been more anti-war when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, than any of these Democrats. And that's a reality, even if it's right now, even if tomorrow they'll change their mind when it comes to China. Right now, they're the more anti-war party. And that's crazy coming from the Bush era.
Friend of the show, fam, really quickly want to show this too as well, because he hits it right on the nose. The Libertarians haven't picked their candidates yet. We're not going to listen to all of this, but just a little bit about it, because this is what AOC is all about. Watch what David Smith says and what the politicians do when they don't want to talk about foreign policy, when they don't want to be accountable for economics. Take a listen.
Talking about how the left went so out of control. A lot of this was because the George W. Bush administration ended in such disaster that it was almost like they had no seat at the table anymore. I mean, look,
do you know that he had the highest and lowest approval ratings of every president?
After 9/11,
he had
the highest
80-something percent approval rating. Also, at the time he was out of office, it was like 20%.
This might be almost hard for, I think, younger people. I do a lot of shows, and I have a young audience, so I'll talk to like 20-year-olds and stuff. And they don't really, they were like babies when this was happening.
They're babies now.
Well, yeah, but they don't like remember it. I'm saying that you almost feel like the left just controls the broader culture. But this actually was not the case immediately following 9/11. The culture had a very right-wing mood to it. It was very much about like patriotism and hierarchy and military and go America, which was a natural response to being attacked, and it was very much like, and essentially the American people, as you mentioned, the highest approval ratings since we've been recording, presidential approval ratings, the American people gave George W. Bush a blank check to fight this war on terrorism. They go, you have whatever war you want, whatever action you want, whatever policy you want. If you want to grope us at the airports, if you want to torture people,
enter the Patriot Act.
You want to open Guantanamo Bay, the Patriot Act, the Department of Homeland Security being created, whatever you want. And he spent this blank check on 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that led to the deaths of over 1 million people. And what we got for it in turn was our bravest young men blowing their brains out by the tens of thousands at the price tag of trillions of dollars, and the region completely destabilized anyway. Just nothing but, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon got a lot out of it. There's a whole bunch, if you look in Washington, D.C., there's a whole bunch of millionaires out there in Washington, D.C. who did very well off of it.
I talked about this the other day, the zip codes with the highest, incomes?
Every crime, that the zip code with the highest crime in every category. It doesn't matter, burglary, you're talking about murder, everything, the highest, number one, is D.C., but the city also with the most people making over $200,000 a year is DC.
And all of them are making it because they're in some way politically
connected. The entire
connected.
country, including New York, including LA, Newport Beach, Miami, DC's number one, most people making over $200,000 per year.
So, but anyway, just to my point, so then after, and of course now this is what we get out of George W. Bush's blank check. And then on top of that, his presidency ends with the worst financial crash in 100 years. So it was just it was so obvious. So, and this is why Barack Obama is elected, because he was the most anti-George W. Bush thing that people could think of, right? And then Obama comes in and continues all of the Bush policies after running on, I'm going to repeal all of these policies. And then, look, there was a pivot. It was in 2012. Okay, it was when Obama was running for re-election. And what did Obama come out and say for his re-election campaign? Did he come out and say, hey, look, remember I told you I would close Guantanamo Bay? And I did it. No, he couldn't say that. Did he say I ended the war in Iraq? No, he couldn't say that. Did he say we're not torturing people anymore? Did he say we're not dropping bombs? No, in fact, by this point in 2012, not only had Obama continued the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, he had also launched a stupid regime change war in Libya. He was starting to fund a civil war in Syria. And he had the drone bomb campaigns in Yemen and Pakistan. So what did he say? He's got this base of liberals who he hasn't done anything that he promised. So what did he say? I'm for gay marriage. I'm the first president who's ever been for gay marriage. And then put the White House up with the pride flag colors. And if you go look at it, look, this was a concerted effort from the top. You can go look. There are these nexus charts where you can map out words in major publications. I'm not talking about mom and pop news outlets. I'm talking about the New York Times, the Washington Post, like the big dogs. Go track how many times the word racism was mentioned. And around 2012, it shoots up. Social justice shoots up. Transgenderism shoots up. White privilege shoots up. This was forced on the American people. Why are we having these conversations now? No, the people did not wake up one day and decide, we want to have a national conversation about chicks with dicks. That didn't happen. This wasn't an organic movement. It was all of the most powerful people decided this is what we're going to talk about. And why was that? Because it's the perfect look. When you're failing on policy, you pivot to a culture war. You pit people against each other, so they're fighting each other. We had in this country, we had an Occupy Wall Street movement where leftists were standing outside of big banks screaming, we are the 99%. Right-wingers had a populist movement called the Tea Party, where they were outraged about the bailouts of big banks, unsustainable debt, government spending. They don't like that. That's not what the powers that be like. You're getting too close. Look, they like you fighting about issues like abortion. Now, I'm not saying abortion isn't a very important issue. It's a very important issue. But us fighting about that issue doesn't scare anyone at the Federal Reserve. It doesn't scare anyone in the CIA. They don't care if you fight about that issue. They love you fighting over transgender bathrooms. They have and you can see this every day. They're stoking this culture war because they have to distract from the fact that they completely failed on everything else, that everything in the 20th century so far for America, politically speaking, has been a disaster.
It's like distracting people with a submarine.
Huh?
They distract you with the submarine, but the other issues are
Stories
going
like
on too
that.
as
They
well.
love stories like that. CNN loves an airplane crashing. They love something where it'll get clicks and no powerful people will be upset about it. If they
I just that's a good place to.
And she's the leader of that movement, fam. She is
Yeah, of course.
the leader of the culture war movement is AOC. That is what she's there for. And that's why I believe that she is AOCIA. And she was put there for that reason, to stoke these culture wars. Because if they're talking about all these culture war issues, number one, they are the most divisive issues on the planet when it comes to the population. They start fighting each other and yelling at people for their opinions rather than the people up top. You know what I'm saying? But it just gets them away from talking about economics, foreign policy. And that's where we're at. That, along with the movement of the way we teach kids nowadays, where it's not even teaching them to think for themselves. We just teach them to follow. You know what I'm saying? And this is one. It's a multitude of things, but this is what they're doing. They are stoking these culture wars because it works. We fight with each other rather than looking at the ruling class. And AOC is the leader of that movement with the rest of her little squad cronies or whatever.
No, I agree. And what was I going to say? I think it's not just Democrats; it's obviously Republicans too, with the whole transgender issue and all of that, and the abortion issue. It's just by design. They're both doing it. And there's I think a few tweets, a last few tweets we want to get through before we go to the next, the end. Not the next, the end. So I think we'll put it on the folder. Cheese slice. I think I said these last three, and I know you wanted to show one more tweet. So there's a couple of tweets I want to point out because this is really, especially Pasta. When you look at this tweet now after having gone to Cuba, I want to hear your reaction. She deleted this tweet when she saw the reactions. This is at a time when the U.S. was trying to stoke a regime change operation in Cuba. There always are, but this is one of the times where they were really, really pushing it. She said, "Vemos a los cubanos levantarse y protestar por sus derechos como nunca antes." She said, we see the Cubans stand up and protest for their rights like never before. We are in solidarity with them, and we condemn the actions of the anti-democratic leadership by President Diaz-Canel. And she did a whole thread on this, guys. She did a whole thread on this, and then she deleted that. How does this? And I think I even put it out, and then she did a whole statement correcting it and blah blah blah. But really, she was signaling there that she was going to play ball with regime change, right? And what I want to ask you, Pasta, after really after going to Cuba and just seeing the way the blockade has affected people and the way U.S. regime change and involvement has. What do you think of that tweet now? Like, a few years later,
because it's not taking accountability for why there might be protests or why people are upset with the government. The reason why, if there are, and it's, what I'm saying, and I didn't get to meet any of those people. I've heard about them. And so people are like, oh, they're jailed. I said, well, okay, but why is that? Because of the U.S. brutal sanction on the government. There's definitely an economic blockade. You can't access your credit card. You can't access your money. The whole design, the whole reason for sanctions is to do what? To turn the people against their government. So therefore they will want it. It's easier for the United States to then go in and help with the regime change. If you are really serious about the fact that there are protests there, the first thing you would be calling out more than anything is the behavior of the United States and the empire towards Cuba. That's what's stoking the problem. That's what it is. It's the sanctions we thrust upon them. And don't tell me that Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden when he has a week left in his presidency and he slaps them with harder sanctions and then labels them a state sponsor of terror. So therefore, they can't trade with anybody. They can't get anything done. If you want to fix this problem and you want to have any type of accountability whatsoever, you fix your own behavior first. That's not what AOC did. She went the empire way. That's why she took it down, because people were really calling her out right there and saying, you're for the empire. You're for the empire. If you're going to try to put this on Cuba, bullshit. You can never put it on the reaction. It's always got to be on the initial action. And that action is the United States strangling and having a boot on Cuba's neck. Take it off and then see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm glad that people called her out for it, but that was one of the And people were at that point still making excuses like, "Oh, she's blah, she's just, you don't know Cuba is blah blah blah," and it was that, and that was the supposed left, really, there. So, also, the last video I want to show is while AOC pushed symbolic sweet nothings, reminiscent of Marie Antoinette's "Let Them Eat Cake." Remember when she wore that dress?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Reality set in outside with working people taking action. And because it was a bunch of people talking about what was going on at the time with the police, and I believe the police brutality, but also it was a lot of economic issues that a lot of these people were talking about. It was one of those rare moments where people were talking about the economy. And it was a bunch of poor people outside of the Met Gala. Like a bunch of poor people saying we don't have money, we don't have all this stuff. And then AOC was in there and they were kicking these people out. And, she was supposed to be some working class hero. There we are. I mean, it was just another one of those moments where, and they were, they were going after these people. And remember when the people carrying AOC's dress were wearing masks and she wasn't?
Yes. I totally remember. They were wearing masks. Her servants were, and she was. I mean, she was without a mask. Yeah, we saw so much of that too as well. It's a shame. It's a shame that people follow for it. You know what I'm saying? Come on, guys.
Yeah.